All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's informational webinar for Blue Convergence Fund's 2026 Ocean Biodiversity Regional Engagement Grants RFP. I'm joined by my colleagues Emily Knight and Mohammed Al-Hamami from the BCF team, and we're excited to officially launch this funding opportunity. A quick overview of how we'll use our time today. We'll briefly go over a few housekeeping notes. Then I'll provide a brief intro into the Blue Convergence Fund and the Ocean Biodiversity Program. And then we'll have a walkthrough of the RFP, including its scope, focal regions, and priority themes. And then talk a little bit about how you may apply and talk about the process, eligibility, and evaluation. Then we'll spend most of the remaining time in a Q&A session. So first, for some virtual housekeeping, just a few items. We are recording this session and we'll share the recording afterwards. Everyone is muted, so please use the Q&A box to submit any questions throughout the webinar or during the Q&A session at the end. We will answer as many questions as we can live, but if we don't get to your question or if it's very specific, you can email us afterwards at grants@blueconvergence.org. One important note for today's webinar and the Q&A session. Today is essentially a high-level walkthrough. The RFP on our website is the definitive source for requirements and eligibility, and we'll refer to that often throughout this presentation. That said, we can clarify what the RFP says, but we can't comment on the competitiveness of individual project ideas or facilitate a pre-review process of your proposal ideas. So, starting off, Blue Convergence Fund is a grant-making nonprofit that's focused on turning ocean and coastal knowledge into action that's grounded in community needs. We aim to support solutions that are durable, equitable, and shaped by collaboration. For the Ocean Biodiversity Program, we've covered the full program launch in an earlier webinar, and we're going to put the link in the chat in case you haven't seen that. For today, though, 3 points matter for this RFP. One, ocean biodiversity is a living foundation for the United States' natural heritage, well-being, and resilience. And communities depend on diverse ocean life for cultural identity, food security, livelihoods, and safety, from working waterfronts and subsistence practices to recreation and coastal protection. At the same time, many coastal and marine ecosystems are experiencing rapid change and loss driven by pollution, development pressures, climate change, and competing uses and other stressors. Across our scoping, we've heard a consistent pattern. Knowledge exists, but it doesn't reliably make it into decisions. And the work of convening, aligning, and packaging knowledge for use is often under-resourced. With that, we developed this approach of listen, support, and engage. We're listening directly in place to understand decision contexts and what's blocking knowledge from being used. We're supporting and funding what's missing, especially where engagement and coordination are the bottleneck that keeps existing knowledge from becoming used in practice. And we're engaging. We're helping to connect learning across projects so lessons travel beyond a single project or place. This RFP is an early step in that broader strategy, and I will pass it to Emily to walk through how we're putting this plan into action. Emily, take it away.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jason. And it's great to see so many folks here with us today. And I'm really excited about this RFP and to be continuing to working with Jason on it because we've been working on it for a long time. Anyway, so in terms of like how we listened, what we heard, what we did is we kind of combined a number of approaches to listening, both formal and informal. We held we held virtual listening sessions for the public for people to join in each of the regions, the Chesapeake Bay, Mobile Bay, and Puget Sound. And we had a number of individual scoping conversations and even did a written request for information with the intent to try to gather as much information as we could. But I want to highlight that the listening component is more than just informing this RFP specifically. It's also about informing the direction as a whole with this RFP as a start, because we really want to sort of shift the conversation about ocean biodiversity. And the projects that emerge from this first RFP um, will also benefit from all we're learning in terms of enhancing their impact on decisions, um, and the larger conversation around ocean biodiversity and the use of ocean biodiversity information in the United States. Um, so go to slide 8. So what we learned is like we learned about ocean biodiversity priority needs in each region, which Jason will get into when he details the scope of the RFP itself. Um, but there were, of course, unique needs in each region, but also a shared element was that the greatest needs are with communities and in communities to connect communities more closely to the decision-making table and to break down sort of key silos. So essentially, like engagement was a key factor that is holding back progress, not collecting more information or collecting new data. And so, related to that, another common need across the regions was like, how do we get better at mobilizing existing information in management across different management jurisdictions? Because ocean biodiversity information could be used in fisheries, it could be used in restoration, it could be used in a lot of different things. And sometimes it's collected for one reason and used for one reason, but not necessarily the other ways that it could be useful. So we also learned about in all of our listening engagement needs across a couple of levels. One is like working engagement into the RFP itself. So we're hoping for people to propose engagement grants about how engagement can unlock the use of existing information in better ways, and that would be funded. But then there's a second piece that is about working, our grantees working with us at Blue Convergence Fund and sharing the lessons learned across regions and at broader scales. So the thing that we can add as sort of knowledge to action practitioners is to complement the engagement that the grantees end up doing and share it across broader scales and ensure that like other people in other places are seeing how people are engaging with what are often somewhat common challenges across unique scales. So if you want to go to the next slide. So in terms of the RFP itself, and I'll hand it back to Jason soon to talk through the details of that. The framing is focusing on the water decisions across jurisdictions that could be stronger through more effective use of ocean biodiversity information. So, new science, new research is not the primary focus of this. It's again going back to where does like people working together actually hold back better decisions and mobilizing existing knowledge for action through engagement. And we'll want to understand, in your proposals, how you plan to involve people and any emphasis on equity, especially because we want this to be more open and inclusive. That's part of our approach to doing requests for proposals versus seeking out projects, is we want, you know, people who can propose ideas to come to us, teach us something new, you know? Um, and we hope to learn how engagement, which is often a necessary but under-resourced component, um, can help illuminate how ocean biodiversity information is actually essential to improving a lot of different decisions that we make again across different management jurisdictions. And so I'm going to pass it back to Jason now to dig into the RFP.
Great. Thanks so much, Emily. So, as Emily mentioned, this RFP is funding engagement projects that mobilize existing knowledge for decisions tied to ocean, coastal, and/or estuarine biodiversity. And we're focusing on three specific regions: the Chesapeake Bay, Mobile Bay, and Puget Sound. A note on geography, projects must be grounded in the bay, sound, or coastal system. Watershed components can be included but only when upstream actions clearly affect downstream biodiversity outcomes, and that the engagement is tied to a defined decision pathway in the bay, sound, or coastal system. For logistics, the projects are up to 18 months and are up to a maximum of $50,000 USD. In terms of what we're expecting to see in the proposals, this is kind of an overview, and there's a lot of detail in that is already in the RFP documents that you should follow and hold as the definitive source. But just broadly, the proposal we're looking for the decision context and use. Essentially, what specific decisions you're aiming to inform, and what would it look like for the work to be used. The barriers to use, the main reasons existing biodiversity relevant knowledge isn't shaping those decisions today. Who's engaged and the roles that they play, essentially which decision makers, communities, or rights holders, practitioners, knowledge holders will participate, and what roles they'll play in shaping and carrying out the work. A little bit on outcomes, products, and practice change, essentially the concrete products or practice change you'll deliver through proposed engagement, and when they'll be ready and relative for the decision window. And also building on what already exists, not recreating the wheel. So, what existing venues, initiatives, or processes you'll plug into directly, and how the project is adding value without duplicating standing efforts. All of this, as I mentioned, is laid out in the project description section of the RFP, so please use that as a resource when preparing your proposal. I also wanted to go through a few of the definitions that we have outlined in the RFP to help to guide you in proposal writing. One is ocean biodiversity. This can be a big term, and we're not going to prescribe a single definition for it. Instead, the applicants should define what ocean, coastal, or estuarine biodiversity means in your communities and decision contexts, with a note to keep biodiversity as the primary focus and connected to the decision needs and the outcomes. In terms of knowledge, we're keeping this broad. We consider knowledge as encompassing both Western and non-Western traditions of knowledge. This can include many ways of knowing, like natural sciences and monitoring, indigenous and local knowledge, lived experiences, and relevant social, economic, or policy analyses, just to offer a few examples. And I will mention for proposals that engage with indigenous knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, or local ecological knowledge, there's a specific section in on data sources in the RFP for guidance on the principles and practice of fair, equitable approaches. So just to note that. And then engagement activities. For this RFP, we mean engagement to signify a purposeful, structured process that brings together the people, including underrepresented groups, who hold relevant knowledge, and the people who make, inform, or are affected by management, stewardship, permitting, restoration, or planning decisions or actions that are relevant to ocean biodiversity. Some non-exhaustive examples of this would be site visits or co-design workshops or facilitated cross-sector coordination meetings. There's a variety of different examples that are in the RFP. So for full language and guidance, please refer to the definitions, data governance sections, and examples in that document. Now, let's turn to the regional priority themes, where Emily had mentioned earlier, we distilled three distinct themes that emerged from each of the regions. For proposing, each proposal must identify one region and one theme to write on. And the examples of that are in the RFP, we provide some examples, are illustrative. You can use any approach that clearly shows how engagement mobilizes existing knowledge into a decision pathway, but we've given some illustrative examples therein. I was going to walk through these priority themes, and as we've mentioned earlier in this webinar, these are based on a variety of different scoping tools, processes, and discussions that we've had, including the virtual listening sessions and the request for information that we recently hosted. But to give you an overview of the different themes that you could work on as part of this RFP for the Chesapeake Bay, overall, the themes that we heard emphasized bay-wide coordination because decisions and outcomes really cross tributaries, programs, and jurisdictions. The first priority theme in the Chesapeake Bay is making existing biodiversity information usable across Chesapeake Bay programs and jurisdictions. This theme is about helping folks agree on what to measure, connect what's already being measured across programs, and produce shared syntheses and crosswalks that can be used in bay-wide decisions. The second priority theme is assessing system scale biodiversity outcomes from habitat restoration for bay-wide fisheries and community decisions. This theme focuses on comparing what we're learning from restoration work across multiple sites, using existing monitoring results and lessons learned to understand bay-wide biodiversity outcomes and inform where to restore next and what to adjust. The third priority theme for Chesapeake Bay is managing and responding to change, cumulative impacts, shifting species, and invasive species. This theme brings together this thing brings people together to interpret changing conditions like cumulative impacts, shifting species, and invasives, and turn existing observations into shared signals and clear options that can inform decisions across the bay. Moving on to Mobile Bay. Overall, in Mobile Bay, the themes focus on aligning fisheries, habitat restoration, and watershed to bay dynamics, so knowledge can better support decisions people are already navigating. The first priority theme in this region was making existing biodiversity information usable for fisheries management and working waterfront decisions. The theme focuses on helping fishing communities, managers, and other decision makers use existing monitoring, models, and local observations in fisheries management and working waterfront decisions, especially where information is hard to access, hard to compare, or not aligned with decision needs. The second priority theme for Mobile Bay is developing shared pathways for habitat restoration in Mobile Bay. This theme speaks to aligning restoration goals, trade-offs, and priorities for habitats tied to biodiversity outcomes, drawing from existing studies and monitoring, and producing usable outputs that guide where to restore, what to restore, and how to adapt over time. The third priority theme for Mobile Bay is linking watershed to bay pathways for biodiversity outcomes and community resilience. This theme focuses on connecting upstream drivers and coastal development choices, like salinity intrusion and habitat shifts, to biodiversity outcomes and community priorities, like seafood, clean water, flooding risk, and sense of place. The focus is on turning what's already known into shared understanding and practical next steps for decisions shaping watershed to bay conditions. Now on to Puget Sound. Overall, in Puget Sound, we heard a strong emphasis on moving from plans and data to coordinated use. The first priority theme that came for Puget Sound is making existing biodiversity information usable and interoperable to accelerate action in Puget Sound. The theme focuses on bringing together biodiversity information collected across many efforts into shared products that can be used in decisions, clarifying what exists, connecting it across programs where possible, and timing syntheses to planning, permitting, restoration, and management windows. The second one is advancing habitat recovery through coordinated implementation and shared learning. This theme focuses on helping groups transition existing strategies and recovery plans into coordinated implementation, clarifying who does what by when, reducing duplication, and building shared learning as actions are carried out. And the third priority theme in Puget Sound is connecting land-sea pressures to ocean and coastal biodiversity outcomes. This theme links land-based pressures like stormwater, toxics, and shoreline development, and marine pressures like vessel traffic and underwater noise to biodiversity outcomes, and helps agencies and sectors coordinate around decision pathways that influence those pressures. Okay, so that's the what we're funding by region. Now is the how to submit. First, to reiterate, just to reiterate that the RFP web page, excuse me, the RFP web page includes the full RFP, the required templates that need to be submitted. It has an FAQ document and the submission link, which is internal to that is inside the full RFP and on the website. All of these are at your disposal to use when applying for this funding opportunity. Please refer to those resources and consider your eligibility and scope of project ideas before submitting. Today, we're going to keep this high level and talk about what's required, a bit of the eligibility, and how proposals will be evaluated. So, eligibility is defined on page 8 of the RFP. I just wanted to note that you don't need to upload institutional financial documentation at the initial submission stage, but we strongly recommend you to confirm eligibility with your host institution now. We don't want you to go through the process of pulling together a proposal only to find out later that you're ineligible. If you have any questions after reading the eligibility section, please email us at grants@blueconvergence.org. Let's talk a little bit about submission logistics. You must submit both a proposal narrative and a budget narrative through the submission form on our website by the deadline listed in the RFP and on this slide. We're going to drop the link to that submission form right now in the chat. And just as a reminder, templates for both the project proposal, the project narrative and the budget narrative can be found on the RFP landing page and through the submission link that we're posting in the chat. Please use the budget template provided and do not change the format. I'll repeat, please do not change the format. And one other important note is that we cannot review proposals without an attached budget. You also may submit up to 2 optional letters of support from folks confirming involvement in this project. Those don't count towards the page limit that we said, which is 6 pages, but they are optional for folks who would like to submit those on behalf of their proposal. And again, the deadline for proposal submission, and we'll mention this again later, is April 15th at noon Eastern Time, 11 Central Time, and 9 a.m. Pacific Time. So once proposals come in, they'll be reviewed by a selection panel made up of BCF staff and external reviewers with expertise relevant to the priority topics and regions in this RFP. First, we'll screen for relevance, which relates to the project's alignment with the scope, region, and engagement focus as described in Section 3 of the RFP. Proposals that do not meet the relevance criterion will not move forward. For proposals that do meet the relevance criterion, reviewers then score them using the weighted criteria that you see here and described in the RFP. We've got a section on usable science, which represents 20% of that weighted score, which includes how well the proposal activities align with the needs of end users, the decision-making landscape you're intending to inform, and your project outputs, whether they're going to be useful and usable to those end users. And then we have a evaluation criterion on collaboration and engagement, which will be 50%, weighted as 50% of the score, which will assess whether engagement activities are well suited to the project goals and have a sound, feasible approach. They'll also be looking at, reviewers will also be looking at whether those groups or individuals who might use the information or contribute to project design or outputs are in fact involved in that process. Then we have a criterion on project team and their qualifications, and that will represent 20% of the score. And this will assess whether project team has the experience and capability to deliver on the engagement activities. And then we have a criterion around budget, which is 10%, where the budget is being assessed in terms of whether it's realistic given the project needs and whether those engagement activities are adequately budgeted for. In addition to the scores, BCF is also considering additional factors described in the RFP, such as a balance across regions and decision contexts, and trying to avoid any duplication of existing efforts. Okay, so after reviews, for this RFP funding opportunity, we expect to fund about 6 to 8 projects. And now let's walk through what happens after proposals are reviewed and we move towards awarding decisions. First, we're We will contact the highest ranked proposals for a short call. These calls help us to confirm we understand the decision pathway, engagement approach, and role of partners. After these calls, we will have selected teams will be notified and requested that they've been awarded a grant and will be requested to submit through RPA's grants portal, where the host institution will provide required financial documentation. We'll notify all applicants of outcomes, ones that are awarded and ones that are not, including those. We're aiming to have a final grant agreement fully executed between August 1st and September 1st for planning purposes, so projects can begin their planned work within that window. And finally, we will be notifying all applicants of the outcome, again, whether they were awarded or they were not selected for funding. Okay, a few important dates. We're gonna, let's for a few important dates to track, and we've been mentioning throughout this presentation. One is the informal webinar today, which will be recorded so that you can listen to it again and you can pass it along to colleagues. The proposal submission deadline is April 15th at the designated times that I mentioned earlier, and that's in the RFP as well. And again, the anticipated award start date is between August 1st and September 1st later this year. And